Yeah, and I've got the one and only item on the agenda right now, and I think everybody on the call already knows about it, so we can do it quick. Um, Let me perhaps share my screen to show you the merge requests. So there's certain SLIs in our services that have a feature category, like the entire service is, for example, owned by a group and has a feature category. And we want to include those SLIs in the error budgets. Some of those services include like Gitly and the container registry and so on. So those SLIs already have a feature category defined on them. That's just in the JSON definition. They have a feature category. And to include those into the error budgets, we want to add that label when it gets added to when the metrics get recorded into Prometheus. So the first attempt I did added that label directly into the recordings that are also used for key metrics, which are used for alerting. Yeah, those are the things you look at the service overview dashboard and so forth. So that didn't go so well because we were getting alerts on traffic being increased because the metrics would get aggregated together. Like we would count the metrics without a feature category label and then add the metrics with the feature category label, and that would count double, and it would look weird and would tell SREs to look at things while it's actually not true. Like we didn't have more traffic. So we reverted that. And then the second iteration for that was just to record this separately from the key metrics. So to have a recording that records exactly the same thing as the key metric would record, but add a static feature category label and use that for the error budgets. This obviously is a bit annoying because we record the same thing twice, just add an extra static label. But that way I was sure that it wouldn't get in the way of like anything else. And yeah.
Bob, it's weird. When I reviewed that first merge request, I was like, there was this bug in the back of my head, and I was like, I don't think this is going to work. And then I looked at it, I was like, no, it'll work. And I was like, no, there's something wrong. And then as soon as it happened, I was like, oh, obviously you got to be super careful about adding dimensions to those existing aggregations for that exact reason. But there was something bugging me and I couldn't figure out what it was until I saw it.
Yeah,
But it's no big deal.
the thing is, I think we all need to do this once. To like, I remember Sean wrote some documentation about changing the key metrics using like when using different sources and so on, and that was also triggered by him changing sources and then bells and
Yeah,
whistles.
that was slightly different because I was
Yeah.
trying to combine the before and after because I was changing what we were.
Yeah. And we've actually got a workaround now. That's much safer now because before we used to have that like the apdex was measured like over an hour. There was like this weird thing that we did. And so when you changed an apdex, you would get this sort of decay of the old one dropping off, which was really irritating. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, so like you'd have like if you had the new one, it wouldn't have started until we started recording the new one, and if you had the old one, it would stop at the point we started recording the new one, and then
it would still count after it had stopped, which is
either one of those
silly.
would count, and then you'd be like, oh, everything stopped happening, or
Yeah,
apdex was dropped.
This is different because it was actually, well, the SLI stuff would probably just remain the same, but the problem was in the things that were using the metrics that were recorded from like an aggregation set, but it wouldn't take into account the labels that are defined on an aggregation set. So that's the discussion that Sean brought up. Like, are we going to keep two recordings like forever? We don't have to. I think we can figure out a way to get around that, but I'm kind of wondering if it's worth it.
Could we
That's
change
why-
them over when we're down for the Postgres upgrade? Just
What did you
take
say? I
it.
didn't-
Just add more risk to that, but take advantage of the everything being off.
So everything turns off and we add the label and then, yeah,
Yeah.
no.
No, yeah, I mean, if we have both, it's not ideal, but it's also like we generate them automatically, and it's not adding cardinality to any of the existing metrics because they're a separate set of metrics, and both sets of metrics have exactly the same cardinality. One just has an extra label.
So I have a different opinion, and that is that, well, it's the same opinion, but for a different reason. And that's that, like, from a replaceability point of view and it's better to keep them apart because we can rip the one out and we can replace it without, if we kind of tying the same metrics in for lots of different things, everything becomes risky. All change becomes riskier, right? And at the small cost of having a few extra recording rules, we don't have to be as worried about change, and things are replaceable.
Yeah,
Does that make
okay, that makes
sense?
sense. So yeah,
Yeah.
so what we're saying is like, if we change these feature category ones, that's fine, like, because they're not gonna alert.
We're not going to break
Yeah.
like all of our production, because otherwise we're not going to want to make any changes to them, because we're always going to be like,
Yeah, and the thing-
rather like segment things,
This is a very good point as well, because in the same merge request, both merge requests, I've also added validation for the feature categories defined on those SLIs to see if they're actually still feature categories that exist in our handbook stages.yaml file. So that means that when product decide to rename something, then we would have this exact problem. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think the conclusion is, let's keep them separate and keep the extra recordings. While we're on the topic, I kind of wonder how expensive it is to record something, like, because we just add stuff and we keep adding stuff, and I wonder if that's at some point somebody going to be angry at me for doing that.
So my take on this is, right now I think we have several hundred machines running Git, and we have like 5 machines running Prometheus. So that's a pretty good ratio, and that's just Git, right? That's not even like the rest of our fleet. Okay, and this is actually comes up with the efficiency of Kubernetes discussion, but that's for another day. But my point is that, like, the ratio of the observability stack compared to the rest of our stack is really, really small at the moment. And if we need to, if we get better efficiency from having these extra recording rules, like adding a few more machines, like, I think we should rather, I guess my point is we shouldn't be skimpy on these things. If we get value from it, like, let's carry on with it as long as it's technically feasible. And I think it's technically feasible.
Yeah, the other nice thing about this is what Andrew hinted at in one of the related merge requests is, like, now it's a source rule and it's using, like, it's being recorded in Prometheus and not in Thanos. Okay, thanks everyone. I don't know if anybody else added something to the agenda, but if so.
Yeah, I did. Like I said, I might have to drop as someone comes around to give me a quote for removals. But I'm just going to talk through it first of all, because it's going to be more fiddly to stop screen sharing as well if I have to jump off quickly. So I'm coupling two things together which aren't directly related, but it seems like a good opportunity to do them both at the same time, which is that when we switch to having a single queue for the catch-all shard, we will have a problem which we don't currently have, which is that if you deploy a new worker to Canary, obviously Canary doesn't run Sidekick jobs, but it can schedule Sidekick jobs, so it can schedule that worker. Currently, that's fine with an asterisk, because it will have its own queue, and Sidekick on the main stage won't start listening to that queue until we also deploy Sidekick. So basically, those jobs just wait for however long it takes between us deploying Canary and scheduling the job to us deploying main. and that's already kind of a gotcha that I think like we should be a bit careful about, because like if you add a job to do something when someone does a thing in the app and that's not behind a feature flag and that's just available when it's deployed to Canary, and then we deploy to production like 12 hours later and the thing in the background runs, that's kind of weird. So I think we need to document that anyway. With a single queue for the catch-all shard, those workers will go into that queue and start being picked up immediately, but they will fail because the worker class won't exist on the main shard. On the main stage, because Sidekick won't have been deployed. So we need to do something. And another thing I was thinking about was we set Sidekick default retries to 3 a while ago, which is very, very low. So that means that if your job fails, it will try again 3 times, and that will take like, it's got an exponential backoff, so it takes a couple of minutes. And if our database goes down for say 5 minutes, like it did some point in the last few months, I can't remember, all those jobs in that point will fail. And they will go to the dead jobs queue, but we never ever look at that, and that's always full. So that's basically saying they failed. And so what I want to do is change the default number of retries back to the Sidekick recommended default, which is 25, which happens over a course of like 3 weeks on average. And that seems to be the sort of Sidekick recommended way of handling this case, where you've tried to run a worker that's not, that Sidekick's doesn't know about. Is it'll just try, get a name error, try, get a name error, try, get a name error, and eventually run. So what I'm going to do is explicitly set all existing workers that we have to use 3 retries, because I don't want to change the behavior of any of those. Like some of them might want 3, some of them might, might not be good for us to try more than 3 times, and then have the default going forward to be 25. So then eventually we could go back and change the ones that are already there from 3 to 25, which is probably a more sensible default. So the original reason we changed it to 3 was because a lot of our workers at the time hit external services, and if that external service is down, there's not really much point in trying over the course of 3 weeks. But also some workers are time sensitive, or some workers might fail in expensive ways. But I think it's much better to keep the default at 25 and have people handle that on a case-by-case basis, rather than have the default for those sort of exceptional cases. Bob, you added a couple of things there, and then Andrew did as well. You're on mute, Bob.
The failures that you mentioned, the name errors, we would currently count them as failures in metrics and alerts and stuff. Do we need to find a way to exclude those and only consider jobs that are completely failures, or like, yeah?
No, I think we should still count failures the same way we do now. I think if you have a job that takes 19 retries to work, that should count as 18 failures and 1 success. I think that's reasonable. I think the better way to solve that is to not get into that situation in the first place. So to not schedule, like if you're deploying some code that can schedule a job, put that behind a feature flag or something, so it's not immediately scheduling stuff that wouldn't, like I said, wouldn't work anyway. If we deploy to Canary and then it takes us 2 days to move that to production, that's already a 2-day delay that is nothing to do with the retries. It's just to do with how we deploy things. So I think you'd already be better off using a feature flag to handle that case and thinking about that. And like I said, I need to document that. But I think we should count the failures as failures because they are.
Yeah, and I think in the end, for new features where we've currently hidden behind the single queue per worker thing when deploying Canary, I think since they are new features, they aren't immediately going to be super used and so on. Hopefully they're even behind a feature flag.
Yeah, exactly. Like none of the, I had a look and like we've had a few, but none of them are really like I had a look back in that like a month, and like there's not really that. So like you can just look for a high scheduling latency, and that's sort of a good proxy, because like these will end up with like a scheduling latency of like 8 hours or whatever it is, because they were scheduled when they were on Canary, and then they would run when they were on main.
It could also be over the weekend as well, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it
That's
can
why
be
I
a
said a
lot
couple of
longer.
days.
Yeah,
Like we could deploy to Canary on Friday, and then like for some reason
yeah,
can't go to production until Monday.
or we have a freeze, and yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's already a problem. Is basically what I'm saying. Yeah, and we add new workers relatively frequently.
Yeah.
But it's going to take us a while to get to the same number of new
Just
workers that we have for old.
Just as what about as an idea, what about if all new workers went, because I'm kind of worried about the 25 retries thing, because I think it puts like extra work on the developers to know about that. And then, if they are using an external service, they have to know that they have to set it to 3, and we're kind of putting extra stuff on
They
people
also
to
need
have
to
to
know
know.
to set the
Yeah.
flag has external
Yeah.
dependencies. So we could already count on that a little bit, and then we should maybe just figure out a way
Yeah.
to notify them if they have external dependencies that we can see because they perform requests or whatever,
Hmm.
and then notify them like this worker doesn't have the correct attributes to be doing that.
Yeah. What about if, like, I haven't thought this through fully, and it probably doesn't work, but like if we, in all new jobs that got introduced, what happens if they were in like the, I don't know, wet behind the ears queue, and then that queue, that doesn't really, and then, that, because then you don't have to worry about them getting retried because there's nothing, no, I haven't thought it
Yeah,
through.
I see where you're going with that. I think the challenge is like who
Yeah.
says that a job is new.
It almost
like,
sounds
well,
like
it's
you want
when
to
you-
run a canary stage for Sidekick, Andrew.
Well,
This is madness.
Okay. So that is actually really the problem here, right? Is there's an impedance mismatch between our workflows here, and there's an issue that's as old as the hills, that is Canary Sidekick, and it's actually kind of amazing that we are still running Sidekick without a Canary, considering it's such an important piece of our infrastructure. And maybe and this is just a smell that kind of comes from that.
Yeah, I think sort of a theme of some of the work we're doing now, though, is to try and work with rather than against Sidekick. So use fewer queues, use the default retries, like do what it's expecting us to do. I do see what you mean about not running a Sidekick Canary. Like, basically, this is only a problem that affects GitLab.com. Like, it will affect some zero downtime customer deploys. But they're not likely to have several days.
Canary.
Yeah, exactly. They won't have a canary. It will just be because they've deployed some part of their fleet that schedules jobs before they deploy some part of their fleet that processes jobs. So it's not going to be several days. It might be like on the order of an hour or two. So we could go lower than 25. I just think.
So
the
what
default
about
is a better starting point than 3.
No, I'm all for bringing us back in line with like the way Sidekick intends to be used. Like, I think that's all good. My other question about the canary smell is, I imagine that when we have zonal Sidekick clusters, it'll be much easier for us to run a Sidekick canary cluster, because it's kind of just another zone in a way.
Yeah, well, it would happen naturally
be.
if you deploy to one zone first, right? Like, I mean, obviously you would want to formalize that a bit more to make it like a canary. But like it would just be like
I think so. So the way that this is something I discovered yesterday. So we've got the 3 zonal clusters. So Git and API run in the zones, but then Canary of those things runs on the regional cluster, which is kind of, to me, I find that very surprising. Like, it's like, wait, what? Well, why is this? So the Canary spread across everywhere, And then so people were like, oh, but we don't want to have like these node pools, and because it's going to be too small. Each canary be too
Oh, right.
small.
Yeah, the
But
canaries will be
then,
tiny.
but the thing is that I kind of think that if we just, and then the other problem is that Helm doesn't understand stages, right?
Mhm.
So that's one of the reasons why we can't deploy the canary stage into the existing clusters. So either we need to do like a whole bunch of work around that, but another option would be to have, we've got 3 zones at the moment. We make it 4 zones, and the 4th zone
It's
is say
canary.
an A, and it's just canary, and
Yeah.
and then everything's the same, right? As opposed to everything being kind of different.
Yeah, and like you said, that also then makes it automatic for things like anything else that goes into
Yeah.
that is zone local. So like,
Yeah.
potentially Sidekick in future automatically gets a canary.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
then it
because
does mean
it's just wired into its own canary Redis and
and I
or
don't know
Redis
how it looks
sidekick
at the
at
moment
least.
actually for canary, because I haven't really looked at that, but I assume it's just as simple to say Sidekick doesn't run on zone A, which is canary, as Sidekick doesn't run in the regional cluster, which is presumably what we say
Yeah.
at the moment.
Well, so at the moment, Sidekick runs in the regional
Oh, well, it
cluster
has to,
along with
yeah.
the canaries.
So
Yeah.
how do
So
how do we deploy the canaries without deploying Sidekick then?
that's a very good. Maybe because they're different pods and they're different
Oh,
containers
right,
and they don't
yeah.
overwrite one. But it's all a bit like.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about Kubernetes, but it seems like it's easier
Yeah.
to say like this zone is canary
Yeah.
and that zone doesn't run Sidekick,
I,
and then all the other zones run Sidekick, and then
I,
potentially add
yeah.
Sidekick into that zone rather than to do like we're going to deploy just web and
Yes.
API,
Yeah.
whatever
It just,
thing.
the most important thing is that people can grok it. And
Yeah.
like from the last day, like I've been like, wait, what? What? Really? And so that's only going to get worse as we move more workloads over there. And so keeping it simple is like as important as any technical solution, right?
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Speaking of keeping it simple, one other thing I decided to do was at least figure out what the current catch-all on Kubernetes Sidekick queue selector means, because it's like a 9,000 character line that just picks a bunch of queues by name. So we need to
oh
change that one.
yes,
Yeah.
that's just dead. So
Yeah, I'm
I
trying to
can't
pay
even
that down
remember the
before we
reason
change
for
it to
that.
just say default
Yeah.
and mailers, because like
Yeah.
I
There
don't
was
feel
an incident
confident
the
in
other
changing it
day.
right now.
Yeah, and someone was like, yeah, it's kind of terrifying. I don't know why. There was some reason. There's a reason. Skarbek knows the
But yeah,
best
I
about
need to
that.
speak to him because I need to
Yeah.
figure out like do new queues automatically go to Kubernetes right now, or do they go to catch all on VMs? Because I think they'd probably go to catch all on VMs just because it's not.
That's a
It's
good question. Yeah. You could probably find some newish
yeah,
queue
I
and see
will
where.
do. But yeah, I
Yeah.
want to tidy that up as part of this as well
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
like
please.
the end goal is to change it to default and mailers, but I don't want to change
Yeah.
it from 9,000 characters to that because like
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
I don't
Don't
even know
even
what
know
those
what's on
mean at the
there.
moment. So
Yeah.
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 Okay, well, yeah, I'm
Cool.
not 100% sold on the 25 retries thing because I'm worried that because I want to increase the number of retries anyway, I'm sort of using
Mm.
motivated reasoning to say, well, okay, this could also fix this other thing that we need to fix now, so I'm just going to do kind of both at the same time. So I am still going to play around with this a bit, but that's where I am right
I guess if every retry is counting down the SLI, then we'll get alerted if there's like really bad things, right?
now. Yes, exactly. So like, and you know, if you have a high retry to success ratio,
Yeah,
at
yeah.
the moment that could be masked by just 3 retries and then failure.
Mm.
And again, this wouldn't apply to existing workers initially because we'd need to go through them one by one basically and check them. But for new workers, it would be nice to be able to be a bit more confident and say
Mm.
this isn't just failing 3 times and going dead, because we've added metrics for that, but we don't add any alerting on the dead job stuff at the moment, right?
But we
So
also aren't we talking about moving towards using a worker instead of queue for SLIs as well? Like
oh
now
yes,
we just do queue
Yeah,
and that
yeah,
works
yeah. It
because
has to move. Yeah,
but
because
we
yeah.
have an issue for that, and we can already change it because we already have the labels.
yeah,
The labels. Yeah,
So
Yeah, because
yeah.
otherwise it would be way too mushy.
Oh, sorry. I say we could already change it. We sort of blocked that on the issue to create the dashboard, which I think Jakob was going to take. So we'll create the dashboard, which will also create the recording rules, and then we'll create the alerts after the recording rules have been in place for a while.
Cool.
Because we don't want to add the recording rules and immediately alert on them. Cool.
Cool.
Andrew.
This is just a silly thing that I was working on immediately before this call. And it's like a terrible hack. But I'm working on all the Kubernetes monitoring at the moment. And one of the other unusual things is that we have a lot of node pools, and far too many. So like for the Git service, we have separate node pools for the shell and HTTP, SSH and HTTPS components, you know. So kind of like we're saying to Kubernetes, yeah, do bin packing, but like you can only pack one type of container in these bins, right? Like you don't get any choices. And we need to fix that. But also the other thing is that all of these different pools are all fixed in size. And some of them are probably like maxing out, and we don't have any way of monitoring that. Stackdriver doesn't export any information for this. And so the first thing I started doing was, okay, we're just going to manually sync it up. So we're just going to have a manual list. And then I realized like they're all different, and there's no rhyme or reason in the sizing. Because there's 3 pools in Terraform, there's kind of a copy and paste. And I think what's happened is that people have gone and updated the pool sizes, but they've only done it on 2 of the 3 or 1 of the 3. So they're all different, and that's only going to carry on, right? And so I decided against manually syncing it up, because there's like 25 different numbers that we've got to keep synced just for production. And then we've also got staging and everything else. And so I just decided it was much easier to do an automatic thing. So my choices then were, do I build an exporter that queries the API and then stand that up and get that into Prometheus? And like my eyes were dulling over. And so I built this little hack. And basically what it does is it takes the Terraform, it asks Terraform, like, give me all the information about the state that you manage. And then I just use a JQ script to pull things out of that and then turn that into Prometheus metrics. And I push that to the push gateway, which is like the world's biggest hack, but it lets us get on with more important things.
Could that also be a GitLab pages site that Prometheus then scrapes?
It's funny because the first way that I was going to do the Tamland Prometheus metrics was going to be to publish in the site a prom file that gets scraped. And then I realized that Push Gateway is much nicer than that. So you can use Push Gateway, and we have Push Gateway. So that's how Tamland talks to Prometheus.
And I'm assuming
I don't know if you're aware of that change that I did.
The scrapes only happen when the script runs, as opposed to like, you know, if it's a pages site, then the scrapes will happen every every whatever scrape interval is, even though nothing's changing most of the time.
Yeah, Push Gateway has got like a slightly surprising approach. Like I wasn't sure. So it has state, right? And then you have a thing called a grouping key, and it's arbitrary, but normally people use job and instance as the grouping key. And job for Tamland, the job is Tamland, and then grouping key is basically the page that you're showing. And then whenever you push to that job and grouping key, all the existing state is flushed out, and then it's replaced with whatever metrics you push in. So you push in a group of metrics, and then you can delete. So I guess the thing that I didn't understand about Push Gateway was that it has state that stays like that until the next time you push, and then it doesn't just like overwrite the individual metrics. It basically removes everything under a particular grouping key with job instance and then replaces it. So it's actually you can do quite nice things with it. So you can structure things, and you can also delete by grouping key and do things like that if you make a mistake. But yeah, so I've just kind of, you can see on that merge request, if you scroll, you can see there's like lots of different numbers there, and none of it's but hopefully once we get monitoring on this, it'll show up, you know, where the problems are in the current thing, because we'll start alerting on node pools that are saturated.
Yeah, that would be that's an item for the infrastructure Christmas quiz. Like, what's the maximum node pool size of shell 1 versus
Well, there's different. Like I think two of them.
sorry,
are,
shell 1 in US East 1D compared to shell 1 in
yeah,
US
yeah,
East 1C, like
and
whatever.
and they're not the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing that's kind of shocking is how many instances we are running compared to before, right?
Mhm.
So before we had 25 Git machines, and now we've got 3 clusters with like a lot more than that. And I think we need to
Over what
do
kind
some
of
sort of
time?
assessment of this.
Over what kind of time period is that increase? Like that's like from 25 to
Well,
what we have now. That's like a lot.
6 times. I haven't actually done the maths, but I'm in my head. It's like in my heart. It's like 6 times more machines that we're using to run the same fleet, and that's in when did we move Git over? Maybe
I have no idea.
4 times.
But is that in
Um,
is that in a year? Was
no,
it just
no.
was that
It's
just
in
in
a
the
few
act of
months.
moving them over?
Yeah. So there's definitely I don't know, I don't have like a full story here, but I think now that we're starting to look at the monitoring of this, I think it'll become, because at the moment it's, at least to me in my head, it's all quite opaque. Like I don't really know, like kind of Kubernetes is just doing things, but we need to kind of like understand if we're running things right, because it seems like the step up has been pretty
Well,
drastic.
it just also, I mean, if the Sidekick, if our challenges with Sidekick and Redis have taught us anything, it's that we need to be making sure that we're using the technology the way it's supposed to be used. And
Yeah.
I think anything is, it's always good to make those assessments from time to time, just to check that this is definitely still the right thing to do.
Yeah. Bye, Sean. Yeah. So, but the other reason why I kind of brought it up here is that there might be other things that we want to use this for. I can't think of anything yet, but that's why I specifically gave it quite a generic name, like Terraform report. So if there's other things that we want to stick into the Prometheus that we need, that sometimes I do syncs at the moment. So I'm like, there's a comment on like the run books. If you change this, also change this. And then on the other repo, I'm like, if you change this, also change this. And this just kind of like is a real hacky way around that. So something to keep in mind if you find yourself writing those like cross-reference sync things.
Would already be helpful if we moved some of that stuff over from ops to gitlab.com.
Yes, I think that the Terraform will always run on ops because of the permissions and
Yeah, running stuff, fine, but
yeah,
doing stuff like changing stuff,
yeah,
because now you're like the cross references you mentioned, if they are,
yeah,
if like
yeah,
we could have a bot
totally.
shouting or that kind of stuff.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, it's I find it quite irritating, and then like you never see the references, and yeah, cool. And then the last thing that I wanted to raise, this is kind of like if we have time,
That's
your
probably a good one to
presentation's
go over.
awesome. Yeah. So I don't know if it's just me, but I kind of wanted to talk about two things. The first is around like expectations of like what those minutes are, because when we say 20 minutes in a month, how we derive that as opposed to 99.95, because I kind of, and maybe this is just me reading it wrong, but I feel like people think that they're two separate sources, and they're not.
Check the comment I linked. I have the same problem, and the best way I can explain it is using a ridiculous example of 4 requests and how that calculate. If you have 4 requests in 28 days and they perform like that, that's how much you spent.
Yeah.
I think it makes it hard, but yeah, it's something that.
When you say you think it makes it hard, what is you think it makes it hard? What are the two it's in that sentence?
I think using minutes to communicate this makes it hard, makes the error budget hard to grasp, because it's okay if you are a group that is source code management or continuous integration and so on, who have plenty of traffic, but there's also groups there that have very little. So one bad request has a lot bigger impact.
Yeah.
And then they see their minutes go down super fast.
Yeah.
Because their feature suddenly gets more traffic and they weren't prepared for the scale or whatever. And it just, yeah.
So my in my mind, like this might not be true. So, because I haven't spoken to enough people about it, but in my mind, I imagine when some of the product managers think about minutes, they think that like GitLab.com goes down, somebody's like, start a stopwatch, right? And then for 3 minutes, GitLab isn't available, and then stop the stopwatch, and then we assign that to a stage group.
Yeah, then we say,
and that's like absolutely not.
But that's not it.
Yeah, it's not that at all, right? It's basically just turning a percentage into a time value.
It's also that percentage is not GitLab.com availability. It's your feature categories availability. So that's also very important.
Well, that's what I was going to ask next is thinking about like what you said there with like, they start the stopwatch and they end the stopwatch, because it's the difference between on and off. Like it's GitLab.com is up or it's down. But what we're trying to convey to them is it's not as good as it needs to be. So GitLab.com can still be up. It's just not running as fast, as error-free as it's supposed to. Like by the thresholds we have defined, it's underneath those thresholds.
So what it is like every request we assign to a group. Right?
Yeah.
And we're saying that this is, and then at the end of those 28 days, right, we say, of all the requests that came to your group, right, 99.9% of them were good and 0.1% were bad. Then we say 0.1% of 28 days is equal to 10 minutes or whatever, 20 minutes. And then that's how that number comes about. It's not because obviously if we gave every group
the problem is that
20
it's
minutes,
not time.
it would be,
Yeah, but I think it's about how you communicate the message to them, because yes, we don't want them to think that this is about the difference between on and offness in GitLab.com. It's about how your stuff, the stuff that is attributed to your stage group performed. So as long as, I think we need to insert that. So regardless of percentage or minutes, the first thing that we need to do in that presentation is make an adjustment to say, your number is about your stuff. Your stage group number is about your specific stage group. We're not taking other, and that's why the attribution of feature categories on your Sidekick workers and on your requests and all of the other pieces, this is why the attribution is important, because this is how we route the stuff to you.
Not owned is performing pretty good. So if you want to pick something good, like
and then you can go there.
It to you, that's another way to get your stuff.
So we can make that change in the presentation. Then the second part of the conversation is, what number do we want to show? And the reason that I've been pushing for having minutes is because I feel like the difference between 10 minutes and 15 minutes is more pronounced than the difference between 99.95 and 99.98. Like a 0.03% different. Like it's hard.
But you realize that the minutes is arbitrary, right? You could just make it like 5.
Oh,
like
well, you could make them like
it has the same level of It's not like an actual time value, right? Like
no, I know, and it's like you may as well say, well, your team has scored
apples.
5 cats this month. You know, like you need to have
exactly.
3 cats and 2 dogs instead of 5 apples.
It's
you know,
totally like that's the. I mean, the only thing about minutes is that it's a small. You know, we have different scales.
The thing that Jackie added is, I think, a very good idea, and it goes from 100% to wherever negative you are, and 100% is you haven't spent anything, any percentage point of the 0.05 that your feature category, that your features have, and it goes from 100% to however much you spend.
Well, I think she was talking about it more as the minutes value rather than translating it into another percentage value. So, for example, it would be you start with 20 minutes and then you can go to minus 5 minutes or minus 10 minutes or minus 20 minutes. But I think that why I like having a round number to deal with is because it's easier for some to reason about than a fraction of a percent.
Yeah,
Sean, your
maybe.
thoughts, go.
I agree, disagree,
Yeah.
one of those two.
Wrong answer.
The thing is, we're going to be showing, I think, 3 numbers now. We're going to be showing availability. That's the thing that you can compare with GitLab.com availability, and we want it to be above 99.95. The second number we're going to show is 20 minutes counting down. So you start with, that's the thing that everybody seems to like, is 20 minutes. And if you have slow requests, then that number is going to go down. And the third number is starting from 100%, how much of the 0.05% available as error budget are you using? And we want that number to be above 0. If it's below 0, then you've spent more. If it's above 0, then
that's
you've
not
spent
quite
less.
how I understood the
technically
third
what you
number.
want is,
So that's not quite how I understood the third number. I understood the third number to be that it starts at 0 because it's
why
how
do we
much
need
of.
that?
No, it's something that Jackie has suggested to know how much the overage is. So if you use your entire error budget, you used 100% of your error budget. And if you used 30 hours, you would then say 150% of your error budget was used
30
because
minutes,
you're over.
yeah.
Sorry, 30 minutes. Sorry, hours,
So,
minutes.
so I
Take a look
think,
at the
I mean,
tables in Jackie's comment here.
So
That explains it pretty well. I'm going to link it from the agenda. I can find it.
my concern there is just around having 2 percentages that are, you know, like, okay, so you use 99.95, or use 99%. Wait, is that 99%?
Yeah, I think having 2
errors, or is that
numbers
99% of the budget, right? Like you see it's going to make very confusing conversations.
Perhaps what we do to start with is we have availability and minutes remaining, but we leave the budget percentage remaining off. And if we get feedback that they want it, then we put it in later, because it feels like we're trying to give them too much.
If that's a problem, you say you use 25 minutes out of 20 minutes, or you use 15 minutes out of, so you always keep the out of ... right?
Yeah.
And then people can, if they want to work out that as a percentage, it's very easy to do in your head.
That's the thing that we had. That's the thing that we have now actually on the error budget dashboard, counting up.
Yeah.
It doesn't have an off 20 minutes, but that's what we have now. And the general consensus was, no, we want it counted down, budget remaining.
Well, I think we can have the minutes counting down, but the percentage budget remaining can come off. But also general consensus is Jackie. So like we've had Jackie's feedback, and I think one other feedback, and I think that perhaps we just need more data points. And I'm not saying that Jackie's opinion is not wrong, like is wrong. I'm just saying like it's.
I'm very happy to say that the metrics are fast, and when we're just using the global rules, we can put there anything we want. We can do the cat thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's like, but also like what we're talking about here is like subtraction of like numbers below hopefully 40, right? So
hopefully,
you know, like most people can do like some level of this in their head, but my concern is like if we have 2 things that are percentages, you know, percentages are unitless, and therefore it becomes very confusing as whether you're talking about like percentage of requests or percentage of error budget, or, you know, and so that's the only part that I don't really like. The other thing that I was
going to say, just for the first iteration, we're going to be doing the AMA in the first week of May. So for the first iteration, let's just have availability and minutes remaining, and we'll leave the budget remaining for a future round.
I think that's a good idea. Sean,
your thoughts?
I agree.
Good answer.
No, just looking at the table of Jackie's. So we're saying we'll use the first 2 columns from that table.
Yeah,
that makes sense to me. I mean, I don't really have a strong opinion on the middle 2. I kind of agree with Andrew that it's weird that 1% like relates to your budget and 1% relates to the overall availability. I think that's potentially a bit confusing. but I don't have a strong opinion on the middle two.
Overall availability? What do you mean by overall availability?
Sorry, the left column.
Ah,
So
yeah.
I mean the left column on the right.
Successes over,
Yeah, the left column and the right column like are both percentages, but they mean very different things.
Yeah.
Like, one can be negative and one can't. So
This is exactly why this is a problem.
So the other thing that I was kind of a little bit concerned about is there seems to be a bit of maybe again, it's difficult to read this out of a single presentation, but we are like aptX and latency is totally included in that. And it feels like maybe Jackie feels it's a future iteration where I want to be clear that this is in here now and it is counting towards the error budget.
Yeah, I think when we first started having the conversations, we had only done the first part, and I think the aptX was the first thing included in the budget. I may be wrong, but
No,
I think that
both, yeah.
it's always been both.
We always had both, but we started with one component, and component being Puma.
Yeah.
Now we're adding, that's the thing that I talked about in the first part of the demo. Now we're adding everything else except for Sidekick, and then we're going to add Sidekick.
Yeah.
We can just update that slide to make sure that it is correct and it includes the things that it does. We just don't have to go into a massive amount of detail with all of the, the audience is such that they don't need an exceptional amount of detail. But you're right, the latency's in there, it should say so.
The thing that's important for people to understand about latency is that the way you measure latency in this regard is it's just a type of error. And we treat it as an error if it's above a certain, that's what aptX is. If it's above a certain latency, it's an error. And if it's below that latency, the threshold for Rails, it's 1 second, then it's a success, right? And so in the same way we say, well, if it comes back with a 500, it's an error. If it comes back with a 200, it's a success. It's just the same thing, because I think people get really kind of confused. It's like, if you're talking 95th percentile latency of like 0.9 seconds, there's no sort of trivial way to take that and turn it into an error budget, because it's a different way of measurement, right? It's a percentile value. And so that's why I think a lot of product managers are like, well, we don't have a story for latencies, because they're still thinking in like 95th percentile latency. How do you convert that into an error budget, where we even not even using that. We're thinking of latencies as a Boolean effectively on every request. It either passed or it failed its latency test.
Yeah, and I think for aptX in particular, we might also stop calling things requests, because it's not always a request. Something that can be fast and can be slow.
Yeah.
Something that we can calculate an aptX for.
Yeah.
So
this reminds me, I think we are horribly abusing the term aptX at GitLab, but it's fine. It's our term, but it's not the industry term.
No, because we're measuring performance of a thing, not of the entire application.
But what we're doing is like it's exactly what everyone's doing. Like don't get me wrong, the SLI with the threshold and the above and below, like there's lots and lots of really good talks about like this is the way to do it. And, we're following that, that's the industry standard. It's just that we call that aptX, where other people just call it an SLI.
We have an aptX inside an SLI, kind of.
Yeah.
On the naming thing, our metrics did used to call these transactions, but then that also got confusing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Naming things is hard.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I kind of like request, because like most of them are requests, like a few of them aren't, but like you get the picture.
I'm talking with Alessio at the moment about an aptX for deployments where a request is a merge request. Actually, I suppose it's a request.
Yeah, there you go.
And it's how long it takes to get into production. But we're using the same approach there as well. So, 95% should take less than a day or whatever.
Yeah, I guess the other option is you go even more abstract and you call them like a sample or whatever.
Yeah.
But then that's so abstract that people won't know what you mean either. So
it's until we introduce the new feature of GitLab samples.
Yes.
Cool. I will go ahead and make those changes in the presentation. That's fine.
Could you also make the changes for what we're going to display? Because we've gone, like, there's
Around.
been a lot of back and forth everywhere. I think if it comes from you, it'll be better.
It's fine. Yeah. Okay. I'll put that comment on later today. Cool. Anything else anyone wants to chat about? We've got 5 more minutes. If not, I'll say thank you very much. You're welcome to join on the call later on again. But if not, we'll be recording that call as well. So take care.
Bye.
Bye.